Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Dead or Alive 6. I played it on the PS4, it's also available on the Xbox One. So let's start with the story, which goes pretty much like the background story has always been going with Dead or Alive. Maybe not always, but for quite a while now. There's a shadowy evil organization led by a guy named Donovan. He's trying to create like the ultimate fighter, clone ninjas, create and resurrect other ultimate fighters, etc. Then you've got DOA, which is opposing him, but they're at the same time hosting the Dead or Alive tournament. Honestly, the characters in this game are really just kind of split down the middle. There's the ones who are off fighting evil and the ones who are just there to participate in the tournament. And they've introduced a couple of new characters in this game, but neither one of them really stood out to me. I guess if one had to, Nico did, because she was on the evil side and doing evil stuff. Whereas Diego's there and you're just kind of like, okay, he's there. He really wasn't a well fleshed out character. He hasn't been around that long, so I think they probably should have done a bit more work into who he was. Because he's being tossed into a game with characters who we've seen for pretty much since the beginning, or even some that have at least been around for a game. And I feel like in the previous game, the newer characters got a bit more background to them. As for the audio, the sound effects are still very over the top and kind of cartoony. The voiceover work is still not quite there, and it never has been, so it's kind of one of those charming things of DOA. The music is fine and it works well for what's going on, and it changes varying on the stage. But what you really pay attention to in a fighting game is the sound effects, and they've always been very over the top in DOA, and that works for it. As for the gameplay, as I've stated already, it's a fighting game. It's a 3D fighting game where you can move in the 3D realm rather than being 3D and just 2D movement. The game has a bunch of different modes, including a story mode, which I always love. I gotta say about this story mode, it's pretty jumbled, so it's kind of hard to follow at times, but it still works. I don't like the way you navigate through the story mode, but they also have the traditional arcade mode, the versus mode, the survival mode, which has always been a favorite of mine, and they added the new DOA quest mode, which is pretty cool, and quite frankly adds a lot more replayability to the game. What DOA quest mode is you go into a match using a specific character, and there are 3 challenges to complete. If you can complete all 3 challenges within the match, you get extra points towards unlocking new costumes and outfits, etc. You've also got multiplayer, which I'm a solid like C-ranked fighter at. That's about as good as I get. One cool thing that they have added is there's now a special attack. You get a charge bar that you build up from combos and taking damage, and it leads to a powerful combo. That being said, it's not as crazy powerful as I would have hoped it would have been. As for the controls, and this part will tie a bit into the gameplay mechanics, the controls have always been fairly simplified. There are your 2 main attack buttons. There's a button specifically for block and grab. It's not like other games where there's 4 different buttons for punch and 4 different ones for kick. And I've always kind of liked that, and the way this ties into the gameplay mechanics is the fact that they've actually developed a pretty in-depth fighting system, considering that there's a punch button and a kick button. There's a few other buttons you can use as well that are actually just combinations of those 2, but it is a very simplified and yet in-depth system. It's one of those games that you don't have to be able to memorize every single move that a character has in order to even compete with a computer. I've always liked that game. It's easy to enter, but kind of difficult to master. But as for the controls, they work very well. I've always liked them. I've always felt that they were incredibly responsive. And like I said, simple to learn, difficult to master. And I enjoy that about this game. And I think that boils down to the controls being the way that they are. But again, super responsive, which is incredibly important in a fighting game. Now on to the visuals, which I gotta say I'm not impressed by. While it's a much more arcadey looking game, it doesn't look as good as it should. DOA 6 does not look any better than DOA 5. They've also made some interesting and weird tweaks to the fighters throughout, which is kind of weird. Like Jan Lee, Bass, they don't look quite the same, and it's actually noticeable. But there's a lack of detail in the characters. Not just in the characters, but their clothing. You can't really see the weave of the fabric like you can in so many other games now, and you can't even see the pores in the skin, which has become a pretty common thing in a lot of games now. I will say that there's a lot of new visual flourishes in the arenas, but the arenas themselves don't look that impressive. There's honestly a lack of detail in those. While they've added new things that are visually cool to the arenas, it's just not what I was hoping for. I was hoping, it's been a 2 years, I think, since DOA 5. I was hoping it would look considerably better considering where graphics are at now. Also, while I felt like there were more stage interactions, I didn't feel like there were ones that greatly changed the stage. There were still a few, but I didn't feel like there were as many as in previous games, so that's kind of a knock against the game because that's always been kind of a big thing in the DOA games. You used to be able to knock somebody down a flight of stairs or off a balcony, and now I didn't see as much of that in this game. So to wrap this up, one thing I need to address immediately is fucking Koei Tecmo really needs to chill their shit on the DLC and how they release games. There's a character you can play a story chunk as, but if you want to use them in survival versus anything like that, you can't use them without paying for them. But not only that, their first season pass is more than the fucking game. It's $90-some, and it only has 2 characters and a bunch of costumes. I'm not paying $90 for that shit. It's just an insane amount for what you're getting in that season pass. It's unacceptable, quite frankly. Also, I want to call this out because it was a huge marketing thing that they did. They made a lot of claims that they had toned back the sexuality of DOA, and while they did in some characters' like initial costumes, oh man, it's still there. I was fighting Christy at one point, and the outfit she came out in was like some bondage lingerie looking stuff. So, tone back on the sexuality, my ass. That being said, and my knock against the graphics aside, I actually had a lot of fun playing this. I've always enjoyed the Dead or Alive games, and this is another fun entry. And I like the DOA quest because it's a good challenge. So my conclusion is, if you like a fighting game that's easy to get into and a little more difficult to master, then this is absolutely a game for you. I fully recommend it. For fans of fighting games, if you're like hardcore Street Fighter, this is not going to be a game for you. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me who your favorite Dead or Alive character is? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.